talking to Ertharin Cousin. She has had an incredibly inspiring career from being the Assistant Attorney General in Illinois to being the United States Ambassador to the United Nations Agencies for Food and Agriculture in Rome, Italy, and so much in between. She's here today to talk about her experiences before she gives her talk as our endowed lecturer on Wednesday, March 26th at 7:30 p.m. So just starting off, thank you so much for being here. And again, how are you doing today?
Willow, delighted to be with you here today. I'm really looking forward to my time on campus.
That's so exciting. And have you ever been, where are you from originally?
I am from Chicago, and that is where I'm speaking to you from today.
Very nice.
And that's where I will fly from to participate in this conversation at Bridgewater.
Amazing. Have you been able to travel to Virginia before?
I lived in DC.
Amazing. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
So, yes, I've traveled to DC any number of times. It's a beautiful part of the country where you're located.
Right. Well, the Shenandoah Valley is very excited to see you in the next coming week. So I know I just asked, but I did know that you grew up in Chicago. I read that your parents both worked or volunteered with the community when you were growing up, and that you were in the first class at Lane Tech High School that accepted women. Could you give the audience kind of a general context of your experiences as an adolescent and how they kind of impacted your life moving on?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I grew up the oldest daughter of Julius and Ann Cousin, who my dad was from Louisiana, and was a chef by profession. During a time when, as a Black man, it was very difficult for him to have a chef role in most restaurants. And so he was a struggling entrepreneur with lots of businesses. But what made him interesting, and I often say this, is my dad was a community organizer before Barack Obama made it popular. And he was very much committed to voter registration, voter participation by African Americans. This was in the 1970s and 80s. And he was, and I should say 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And my mom she was trained as a nurse, but became a social worker for the city of Chicago, with two parents, one who's a community activist, the other one who's a social worker. Needless to say, in our household, there was many conversations about the importance of commitment to community, and that it was not just about you. While family, of course, was first, but community, country, and God were all part of our upbringing, and that meant that we were very much involved in ensuring that there were programs that provided access to opportunity for people all across our community. But what we didn't talk about when you talked about my parents was that I lived in Chicago. We have these things called two flats. And unlike in some places where they have duplexes and you have one house next to another, and two flats, you have two apartments in one building. And in the first floor apartment, my grandmother lived down there. And my grandmother was my dad's mom. She was one of those people who believed that nobody should go hungry. While my parents worked in their own ways on those issues related to providing access to incomes and support so that communities could have the food they need, my grandmother was the person who, there was always a pot on her stove, which meant that no matter who you were, if she knew you, you could come in there and there was a meal. It wasn't anything fancy, but there was always food. And if it was, as she got older, when she wasn't able to cook as much, it was also very much about sending my grandfather out to buy a bucket of chicken to make sure that everybody had something to eat. So food's been a big part of my life for all of my life. And I was a very interesting child. in that while I, of course, jumped double dutch in the street with everybody else, I was also quite interested in what was happening in our world. And my mom likes to tell the story of when I was a young teenager, I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I actually went door to door with my neighbors to have them sign a petition to save the baby seals. Now, mind you, we were living in the inner city of the city of Chicago. And what was I worried about? I was worried about the baby seals in Alaska
Oh.
who were. And so our neighbors thought I was a pretty strange kid. But people signed my petition and I sent it to the White House and received a response back from the president. So, it was the kind of household where that type of behavior was encouraged. If you see something, you don't like it, do something about it. And I couldn't think of I think that was a gift that my parents gave to me.
100%. That is amazing. I mean, the importance of voter registration, especially at that time for African Americans, is beyond important. And your mother's work as a nurse and then switching to social work, was there a specific reason she made that switch, or
Oh yeah, it
yeah?
was. She was a nurse during a period of time when LPNs, which was her area, were terribly underpaid, and this was at a time when the city was beginning its what was called at that point Model Cities program. And there were federal dollars that came down that allowed cities to begin to invest in their poorest communities. And so they began to hire people from those communities to work on program implementation. And she was one of those folks who had the education and as a result had the opportunity to participate in these new job programs that were providing benefits to communities where people were living in substandard housing, lack of access to benefits, the kind of things that we talk about today as almost entitlements were completely unavailable to households during those periods. And so many people, even in the city of Chicago, were living in abject poverty and substandard housing. And so in the 60s, when those programs came online, she had the opportunity to lead in those programs, and that led to her career that she became. By the time she retired, she was the director of the senior programs for the city of Chicago. She came a very long way from being the person who knocked on doors and provided services and signed people up for different programs to actually designing and implementing those programs at every level.
That's amazing. And I find those programs really interesting. Do you think that they they almost remind me of, I've heard you speak about the importance of rather than just giving aid, transforming food systems and providing resources to create and sustain agriculture. Providing job opportunities for people in those communities reminds me of that. Do you find similarities in those two?
It's big time similarities in my philosophy of what I always say: we move from saving lives to changing lives, and that was what I did when I was at the World Food Program. I've never met a mother who wanted to stand in line for food. People want the dignity of earning their own living and having enough resources to provide the food that their children require. And when there are no jobs, when there's no economic opportunity, then we need a social safety net that will ensure that people don't go hungry. But our first line of defense should always provide the access to the opportunity for people to earn a living wage that allows them to feed their children.
Right, right. And I mean, I feel like everybody would agree on that, right? Like that makes sense when you think about it deep down. Like you want to have that dignity, so obviously other people would as well. Why do you think that this is kind of, and of course it's changing every day, but why do you think it's been more common to just provide aid rather than these opportunities?
Well, I think there's a combination of issues. Not everybody can work. Let's the disabled, seniors, those who oftentimes, even people who work, there are acute crises that occur in their lives that the ends don't meet. And there's not enough money to pay for the heating bill, the housing bill, and to provide adequate access to food. And so you do need programs that fill that gap. Now, if everyone in the entire country always had enough money to support their needs, you wouldn't need the assistance. You wouldn't need food assistance. That's my utopia. Unfortunately, that's not my reality.
Right.
And when we talk internationally, if you think about what are the primary drivers of acute hunger, it's climate, it's conflict, it's economic instability. And in each one of those situations, while the markets, the lack of access to markets means that you need food assistance, you need aid in order to avoid people going hungry. Just distributing aid without recognizing the opportunity for economic development as opposed to aid is wrong, but not providing aid when there is no other ability, opportunity, methodology, market for people to access food is just as wrong.
Right.
So that's why we have aid programs and economic development programs.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, obviously you need to have both. You can't really have one without the other. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of going back to your experiences, I jumped a little ahead of my list.
That's okay.
Obviously you've had a very diverse career. You've worked at incredible places. You've moved from the private sector to public office to leading global organizations. Did you always know that you wanted to have a career with such big impacts?
My passion has always been about making a difference. And I've been blessed with opportunities that have given me the ability to live that passion. And I don't take it for granted. And I recognize that with those opportunities comes an enormous amount of responsibility for ensuring that every opportunity is not about me, but about the people that I serve and the people that I work with to provide that service. And so it's a ride. I'm often asked, when will I retire? And I say, retire from what? You know, I've had the benefit of not having a job as people think about jobs, but having the ability to work in different programs, settings. Now I've started a new nonprofit, Food Systems for the Future, as well as we're raising an impact investment fund to grow those businesses in communities that can make food more affordable and available. That's my purpose in life, is to use the gifts that God has given me to maximize the opportunity that this work can provide for others. And I'll do it for as long as I have breath.
What an amazing outlook. And what an outlook that I think a leader should have, to not think of it as what is it for me, but what is it for others?
Mm-hmm.
That's incredibly amazing. And I mean, even going back to what you were saying, caring about the seals as a child, I think it makes complete sense. I would love to hear more about your experience as the executive director at the World Food Program. I also found it really interesting, the quote that Hillary Clinton said when she was endorsing you for it. She said that you had been central to designing and implementing our country's food security policies. She said that she was confident that you will continue to be a powerful voice in the global fight against hunger and lend your optimism, energy, and experience in the World Food Program. How was your experience, and how did it feel getting an endorsement from Hillary Clinton?
Along with that endorsement came a significant amount of pressure to perform the work and get it right. I had the privilege of sitting in her office after the secretary appointed me to the post, and after she'd issued those very kind words, and she said, "Okay, what's your 100-day plan? What are you going to accomplish in those first 100 days? What other partners do you need besides the United States?" It was just so having the benefit of a relationship with both Hillary and then as President Obama, as well as a number of the Senate and House Republican leaders who were my partners in this work. And they were supportive but demanding. And my responsibility was to live up to their expectations, because when I was the executive director of the World Food Program, the U.S. provided 40% of the budget. Those are taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. And I, as the steward of those taxpayer dollars, I had a responsibility to ensure that we were delivering to meet the needs of the world's most vulnerable in a manner that was both efficient as well as effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a lot of pressure. When she was first asking you all those questions, did you feel prepared? Were you right on it?
You don't ever go into Hillary Clinton's office unless you're prepared.
Right. You had your notes, you had the receipts.
I have my notes, I have my plans, I'm ready. I didn't take in a whiteboard, but I could have.
That's amazing. And then
luckily the Gates Foundation was quite generous. To me, coming in as a leader of the World Food Program, and they provided me with a grant to work with McKinsey to actually design my first 100 days, even before I started the job. I had the ability to meet with people who had served in the past, as well as with a number of the other countries that were significant donors to the program, as well as with the staff, to identify what were the things that we needed to do to make the organization fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. What were the changes that we required to make to ensure that we could deliver on that promise of a program that was effective as well as efficient. And so by the time I sat down with Hillary Clinton and she asked that question about my 100-day plan, I pulled out my paper and I was ready to tell her exactly what those things were that we wanted to do in that first 100 days and in my entire 5 years, what I hope to achieve during that period of service.
That is amazing. I'm sure having those connections beforehand and being able to reach out and collaborate with everybody was incredibly helpful.
It was amazing.
That's so nice. And then I recognize your fit for purpose, saying that. And I remember in one interview I saw of you, you talked about becoming fit for purpose. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So, what I did was not come in and fire everybody, but at the next reassignment, I asked everyone in the entire organization to reapply for their job. And what that required was for us to ensure that we had the best person working in every post in the company, in the entire organization. It was unheard of in the entire UN system for a leader to say to her, not just my junior staff, but my senior staff, reapply for your job. And we did interviews. There was a significant amount of time and energy, but what we were able to promote some people who had been locked into different jobs because of lack of visibility of their talent. We also offered, in addition to requiring the staff to reapply for their jobs, we also offered an early retirement program. For those folks who didn't believe that they wanted to reapply for their jobs, there was an exit strategy for them. And that way, we were able to ensure that we had the right people right in every post, and in addition to providing the space for realigning and rationalizing the positions and posts. We also ensured that we had the right tools in all of the posts, and we created, with support from the German government at that point, what we call an innovation center. And it was an opportunity for us to look for new tools, new ideas for how we provided service, to ensure that, much like corporations think about continuing to retool to maximize the value of every dollar that you spend and perform the work as efficiently, as effectively as possible, we did that in this UN agency. As I said, unheard of at the time. I was very proud that the year after I left, the team won the Nobel Prize. And much of that was because of how well they performed in some very difficult situations during my tenure, but also because we knew we had the right people in every post.
That is amazing, and such a well thought out, even though it was unheard of, well thought out and very dignified approach to that. Not to get into our administration right now and that stuff, but I mean, that what you were talking about reminded me so much of the Department of Government Efficiency and how they've been laying off people. I think if they had that your approach to it, I mean, the differences would have been.
The reality is, every bureaucracy, there's an opportunity to eliminate fraud and to eliminate waste, to find more efficient ways to work. But what I also found was that 95% of the people that I work with were hardworking, dedicated, competent, and believed in the mission of this organization as much or more than I did. And they were delighted that someone was coming in who would recognize the value of the work that they were performing every day.
Yeah, that is more than amazing. And I think, working at the World Food Program, I would imagine just that people really do care about your mission and want to further it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is when you are working to serve the challenge, the hungry people in places today like Haiti and Lebanon and Gaza and South Sudan and Myanmar, Yemen. Those are not luxury hotspots to work, but this is where our people worked, and they worked in some of the toughest conditions on earth, but they knew why they performed the work, and they could see the difference in the lives of those that they served. And so you're not there for the glory. because there's nobody in the back road of Ouagadougou who's going to see you do the work that you do. But so you live with that personal commitment and fulfillment for achieving your goals. And those were the people, and those continue, the people inside the organization today continue to work with that same level of commitment.
Yeah, truly inspiring. Could you talk a little bit about your experiences going to those countries?
Sure. Phew, where to begin? I'll tell you first of all. I wasn't the first person to lead the organization through, and nor was I the last to lead the organization to serve in these very difficult places to address the challenges of access to access to food. And so the story that I wanted to send back to Americans about how their tax dollars were spent, and to people around the world, because in every country, the majority of the funds that the WFP receives and spends are taxpayer dollars from different countries around the world. And so we need to always keep that in mind when we served. But I wanted people to see that while we were working in tough places, that we were making progress. Because one of the issues that I would often hear is, Ertharin, aren't there always hungry people in the world? Are you really making a difference? And so when I would go to places, I would not take the pictures with babies with flies on their eyes and bloated bellies. I would find the mothers who were working even in tough places to ensure that their children were clean and clothed, and because of the support and assistance that we were providing, that they had fat, happy babies. And even when they weren't as fat as they should have been, that they were happy babies. Because that's what people needed to see, was that we were making a difference in the toughest places on the globe. Now, the reality is, there were places where I saw babies die. And there was nothing that I ever wanted to do to sugarcoat the reality of life in these places. In Somalia, for example, when there was fighting happening and people were leaving to come to the camps in Kenya, or in Ethiopia, when I was in a camp and a mother had walked from South Sudan with her child, and because of lack of access to water and food during that walk, her youngest, a 6-month-old, once they arrived at the camp, passed away. I saw the anguish in that mother what her goal was to not leave her home. That she was forced to leave her home because of ongoing fighting. Her goal was to ensure that her children prospered. And the loss of one of those children in that desire, that walk, was as anguishing for her as would have been for any mother in the city of Chicago who was trying to just keep her babies alive. And so that was what I wanted people to see, was that there were more similarities with those people, with people around the globe that we were serving, as we, as Americans, as mothers, as fathers, as siblings, feel here in the United States, so that we could understand the why of the investment of taxpayer dollars in these programs, the importance of ensuring that our humanity is reflected in our relationship with people around the world who are oftentimes in situations of abject poverty or hunger, and particularly acute hunger. close to starvation, when and that there was that our mindset here in the United States is no different than those mothers, those fathers, those children. And so our need to assist is an imperative as human beings living on the planet.
Right. Having that empathy, having that drive to not just understand their struggle, but help lessen it, of course. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, during those really difficult moments, I mean, were there ever times where you were like, this is kind of a personal question, so feel free to whatever, but were there ever times where it felt like too much for you, or did you have certain things that you could do to kind of ground yourself and...
Sure. I am a person of faith, and I believe God never gives you more than you can handle. And when He would send me into these places, and you would see families or children in such dire situations, my personal grief was not the paramount issue. It was ensuring that I supported my staff in their ability to perform, to ensure that I understood what resources they needed and my role in working to access those resources to support them, and that my responsibility to provide empathy to those families, that to let those mothers know they were seen and that we were there to help, to assist, until she or he could take care of their children themselves.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And to suggest it wasn't hard at times would be less than honest.
Right.
But nobody, not my staff, not the family, not my partners, needed an executive director who couldn't keep it together.
Of course. Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, the personal strength that it takes to, take yourself out of it and be there fully for them. Yeah, it is amazing. What would you say have been some of the biggest challenges or, I guess, learning curves that you've had during your career?
Well, and to that last point, when you say to take yourself out of it, and if my siblings were here listening to this, they would say, and she's just such a big crybaby. So that you just need to know that was huge for her. I cry in commercials. But that's when I'm allowed to be my whole authentic self. And oftentimes when people talk about, but you must bring your whole authentic self. No, I don't. There's some situations where I need I'm not Ertharin, I am my title. And that is what is required in that post at that period. And that is the interesting thing. I often share this conversation with young people, particularly this new generation, that authenticity and is so important. I do not diminish the importance of authenticity, but I also believe that we must recognize when we serve. Again, it's not about us. It is not about me as an individual, you as an individual. It is about those we serve and the mission we're there to perform. And that's a tough lesson to learn. But so when you ask, what did I learn? That's a big one. Is not about you, Ertharin. Not about you. And I think there's so many lessons. I'm a forever learner. I believe I can always learn something new. And as a result, I surround myself with people who are smarter than me. I have an ego that allows me to stand in the midst of intellectual giants, operational experts, that I learn from, I take the lead from. And as a result, I'm a better servant.
That is amazing. Do you have any examples of those that have really inspired you during your career, those that you've surrounded yourself with?
Oh, mio Dio. I have lots of people who have inspired me throughout my career. Um, and I get very uncomfortable with starting to name, because then I'll leave somebody out.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I'll leave someone out. But I can tell you that those who've inspired me have not always been those who were names you would recognize. Oftentimes it was a junior, many times a junior staffer who identified a better way to perform work to ensure that we were serving in the most efficient ways. And I was just, people who we put them into situation, give them certain tools, and they realize that they need to figure out a different way to perform, because what was the system that may have been in place before the crisis occurred would no longer work. And so they need to create or jerry-rig the system different than what's in the handbook for how you should work. But in order to ensure that you could serve as many people as possible in the best ways possible, I admire that level of innovation, ingenuity. And I was always and remain a big supporter of those who are, as many would say, have the capacity to think outside the box, and are not held hostage by this is the way it's always been done.
That makes sense. Yes, thinking outside of the box. As you said, not being constrained by, the status quo or how things had been before. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes complete sense how that is integral in transforming and bettering our situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Particularly when you're working in situations that are acute crisis, or situations where the systems are there for a reason, and I appreciate systems. And when the systems work, let's stay in the system. If you have a better idea, let's talk about it. But when you're in situations that are crisis situations, which oftentimes we found ourselves in, during my time at the World Food Program, or even during my time at what is now Second Feeding America. You needed to get a little creative in how you serve, as opposed to throwing up your hands and say the system doesn't work. Then what can we do? It's always a question you should ask.
Right. What can we do? And going from that, I wanted to ask, what can students and young adults, or anybody listening to this right now, what can they do to support the fight against global hunger? What are some steps that the common person can take?
Sure. First of all, the fact that you're listening to this podcast says you care. Because I can't tell you, I've had elected officials tell me, Ertharin, nobody cares. And we have a responsibility and I would argue that we're all humanitarians in our heart, okay? And we have a responsibility as human beings living on Earth together on this very small blue planet to care about one another. Whether it's somebody I can see or someone I may never know and someone I may never see, to care. And once you care, then working in the organizations in your community that are working to make a difference. They're always looking for those who are willing to step up and volunteer. And oftentimes, even on your campus, there are different programs that it seems like those people do. Become one of those people who do. And then help ensure that the people we elect share your caring. Because when we talk about what are the issues that are important for voters, hunger, until COVID, that was the first time hunger was an issue that politicians began to see my constituents care about.
Right.
We need to, the same level of demand that we put on our elected officials and our institutions for ensuring access to food for every American and every person around the world. We need to keep that political pressure, because if we do not, it is not seen as a priority. And we must, the very basis of security starts with the ability of every child to know that they'll have access to a nutritious meal.
Mm-hmm.
And so get involved.
That's amazing. Everybody listening, get involved. We have food drives on campus a bunch. We have Blue Ridge food banks so close to us with lots of internship and volunteer opportunities. Luckily, I've gotten to speak with them and talk with them a good bit during my career here at Bridgewater, and they're nothing but kind, generous. They want to help the community, exactly like you were talking about. Those little steps are really what changes things. I think a lot of people are kind of stuck with the idea that what are they going to do to help? Those little things don't make a change, but they do. They're the things that lead to bigger change, and they're really important.
And you said it all. And so thank you very much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this and be here for us. And I'm so excited to see you talk at our endowed lecture. Again, that is Wednesday, March 26th at 7:30. Bridgewater College community, make sure to be out and support and listen and learn. Ertharin, this has been amazing. Thank you again. Do you have any last thing you would like to tell our community listening?
That I appreciate every single person who is listening here today, but I'll appreciate you even more if you tell somebody what you heard today. Because you're right, one person, you can start a fire, but it becomes a blaze when we bring everyone along with us. So thank you.